Against the government, he now enjoys the support of protesters. It's a scene anti-government demonstrators say is being repeated across the country as the government loses control of more and more areas. In the eastern city of Benghazi, calls for Muammar Gaddafi to be brought to justice.
We do not want him to flee to another country. We want to punish him because he shed Libyan blood. He killed our young people.
And in the capital, Tripoli, this footage appears to show anti-Gaddafi protesters moving unchallenged in the city on Friday. Earlier on, the city saw violent scenes as security forces loyal to the colonel fired on protesters. Several people were reportedly killed. Following Friday prayers, pro-democracy demonstrators had converged on the capital from towns all around. After claiming protesters across the country are influenced by both Al-Qaeda and hallucinogenic drugs, Libya's leader appeared in front of supporters in Green Square, insisting the population was still behind him.
The Libyan people, if I'm not loved by my people, I don't deserve to live. If my people, the Arab and African peoples, and all peoples do not love Muammar al-Gaddafi does not deserve to live only for one day.
Colonel Gaddafi's defiance contrasting with the view of senior officials who have admitted large parts of the country are now controlled by his opponents. But his son's now on a media offensive, telling invited journalists that Libya's armed forces have not attacked peaceful protesters.
I urge the Europeans to send fact-finding mission to Libya as soon as possible, because we are not afraid of facts. We are worried about rumors and lies.
To back him up, state television has been showing statements by army officers.
We are not fighting the youth because they're part of our people. We are only fighting the bandits. We had strict orders not to attack civilians but to defend ourselves and minimize casualties. The pictures shown on media outlets including AlJazeera are old, and I challenge anyone to show any new pictures of violence against civilians.
Those wanting Gaddafi gone may be feeling emboldened, but for now it seems he's digging in his heels. Tarek Bazley, Al Jazeera.
Well, on to breaking news this hour. Iraq's largest oil refinery has been shut down by a bomb attack. It happened at the Beji plant, 180 kilometers north of Baghdad. 4 people are reported to have been killed. Well, Jane Araf is live in the Iraqi capital for us. Jane, what more can you tell us about this attack?
Sammy, sources at the oil company, it's the North Oil Company, which is part of Iraq's oil ministry, tell us that gunmen burst into that refinery at about 4 o'clock this morning, shooting dead some of the engineers and laying bombs, homemade bombs, in the refinery. Now, that refinery is part of a large complex. It's one of several parts of the Beji complex, which is the biggest refining complex in the north of Iraq, where most of the northern oil fields are. And it is expected to affect refined products such as kerosene, gasoline, all those things that they need to keep this country running. So definitely a blow, and certainly a sign that something we haven't seen in a long time, sabotage of the oil installations, appears to be back. Sammy?
Jane, do we know who's behind it? Is this a return by Al-Qaeda?
It's so difficult to tell who's behind these attacks unless there's a signature, such as suicide vests, which tend to be a signature of Al-Qaeda linked to groups. It could be those kind of groups. It could be a criminal enterprise. It could be almost any variety of factors. But it does follow immediately after one of the biggest protests here in Baghdad and other protests across the country, with people clamoring for more electricity, for better services. This certainly is going to be a setback for those services.
Let's talk a little bit more about those protesters. Pictures which we've obtained appear to show police firing on protesters. What is the mood and reaction like to that inside Iraq?
Well, police firing on protesters has happened in several cities, primarily in the south and the north. We haven't seen it here in Baghdad. In Baghdad, what was expected to be a huge protest turned out to be not quite so huge, but just as passionate, because the roads were closed and people walked for hours. Now, police here used water cannon. In other places, they're not quite so disciplined, and they do tend to fire on even unarmed Iraqis when they feel that they're in danger.
All right, Jane Arraf from Baghdad. The UN Security Council has released a draft resolution calling for action after the violence in Libya. During the meeting late on Friday, Libya's UN ambassador denounced Gaddafi, who he'd called his friend just 3 days earlier. Mohammed Shalgham also criticized Gaddafi's attacks on civilians. In an emotional speech, Shalgham said he couldn't believe the violence the leader was inflicting on his own people. He asked the UN to help save the Libyan people. Well, Ban Ki-moon also urged the UN to act right away and gave harrowing details of the violence.
Estimates indicate that more than 1,000 people have been killed. The eastern part of the country is reported to be under the control of opposition elements who have taken over arms and ammunition from weapon depot. There are daily clashes in at least 3 cities near Tripoli. The streets of the capital are largely deserted. People cannot leave their houses for fear of being shot by government forces or militias. Colonel Gaddafi's supporters are reportedly conducting house-by-house searches and arrests. According to some reports, they have even gone into hospitals to kill wounded opponents.
Well, Scott Heidler is following events at the UN. Here's the latest from the headquarters in New York.
After a briefing by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of just how dire the situation is in Libya, the Security Council also heard an emotional plea from the Libyan ambassador to the United Nations. That is when there was a draft resolution floated to be reviewed by the members. It was drafted by the United Kingdom and France, and in that resolution it calls for a referral to the International Criminal Court for possible crimes against humanity. There's an arms embargo and a travel ban for Gaddafi's inner circle. Now, this resolution, a draft resolution, is going to be looked at again by a special session Saturday by the Security Council, and all indications are right now that it's expected to pass. Now, it has broad appeal, and that's not just from Western nations. There has been a unified voice of the international community that something needs to be done in Libya, and it appears as though Saturday is possibly when the Security Council will actually do something.
Let's take you back to the breaking news story we've been following, the attack on Beji oil refinery in Iraq, which, according to sources, has now shut down the oil refinery. We can bring in Dr. Saadallah Al-Fathi. He's a former head of the Energy Studies Department at OPEC and a former advisor to the Iraqi oil ministry. He joins us from Dubai. How significant is it if this refinery is indeed shut down now?
Well, it's very significant because of its size. You know, I mean, it does supply almost half the fuel production to the Iraqi market. So it is very significant, actually, as it processes almost 250,000 barrels every day.
Okay, and how would this impact Iraq's oil exporting ability?
No, this is independent from that activity, you know, because on the contrary, you know, as long as the refinery is down, it means that Iraq may have more crude oil for export.
So do you expect perhaps an easing of oil prices as a result of this?
Well, we are talking about a tragedy and people who got killed there, so I don't care really how it affects oil prices.
Yes, of course, the primary concern is the deaths of people, but also oil prices have been a concern for other people struggling in other parts of the world, dealing with inflation and the rising costs of food prices. And in that sense, do you expect any implications for hardship for others elsewhere?
No, it depends how long the refinery is shut down, you see, because the report is very scanty. And also the report is suspicious. You know, I mean, why should the an incident in a technical plant comes from the governor of Salah ad-Din rather than the refinery people.
So
there are many reasons for explosion in a refinery besides planting bombs.
So are you doubting that this has been shut down as a result of a bomb attack?
Well, I am not doubting. I just say I cannot, the information available now, to say that this is a bomb attack.
All right.
Especially that, say, bombs planted. You know, it's very difficult to get inside the refinery and planting bombs.
All right, and what sort of hardship might this pose on Iraqis? You mentioned there that about half of the refined products come from this plant.
Yes, there are already shortages in Iraq with petroleum products, especially gasoline. And this means that Iraq has to import more gasoline or you know, try to operate other refineries at a higher level to try and substitute what happened.
All right, Dr. Saadallah Al-Fathi, thanks so much for talking to us. You're with Al Jazeera, with plenty more ahead, including Ireland's government prepares for a vote of backlash after the country's economic collapse, and...
I'm Harry Fawcett reporting on Japan's demographic crisis from a near-deserted village in rural Japan, where the elderly have had to leave their homes to seek refuge from the winter.
Well, across the United States, we did see some tornadic activity from Thursday evening until Friday. That's all due to a cold front that pushed through. You can see it right here on the satellite image. Cold air behind, very warm air ahead of the system. That's where we saw the clash of air masses. Now, as we go into Saturday, we're finally going to see a break there. That is going to be moving out into the Atlantic, but the big picture is going to be what's happening here in California. An air low pressure is going to be dropping down the coast and bringing quite substantial rains to parts of Los Angeles. Now, in the foothills of Los Angeles, that's where we can see some mudslides in the region. Very susceptible to mudslides. Not a lot of vegetation there because of the wildfires, but up to the north, we're going to see some great snow for the last part of the ski season. A little bit further down toward the south, towards Costa Rica, as well as Guatemala and Panama, we're going to be seeing some very heavy rain showers over the next couple of days. They had a break in the forecast at the beginning of the week, but now the rain is back. Also in Venezuela, Caracas, you're going to be seeing some very heavy rain showers at about 26 degrees. Up towards the north, though, very sunny conditions all the way from Cuba, Jamaica, as well as the Dominican Republic. Now, over towards Europe, that's a whole nother story. There is only one location I can tell you that's going to be having great weather on Saturday, and that is going to be for parts of Portugal, as well as Spain, with sunny conditions in the mid-20s.
It is in the details. A look. A connection. The moments that reveal the truth.